Hello, everybody, and welcome to another special live Get in Tune here at the Northeast Comic Con, where it is guaranteed not boring and free parking. So come on down. We got a lot of great artists and vendors here today. Back with another fantastic workshop. Not workshop, sorry, panel. I got two amazing fantasy artists. I've been staring at their work all weekend. Their table is right next to mine. And there may be some money dropped before the show is over at their table. I'm not going to lie. I've been fascinated by their work. And I'm super excited because, as you guys who follow my show know, I love fantasy art. Sci-fi and fantasy art are my two favorite things in this world. So let's bring them on and let them introduce themselves. And let me get you guys in there. There you go. And ladies first.
Hi, I'm Marianne Plumridge. I'm wife of Bob Eggleton, but I also have my own art career, as it was, starting really, really early, as Cordy's my mum. I learned oil paintings learning how to use oil paints when I was 12, and I did a bit of fan art in the 1980s, but continued to paint. And I started out with the whole unicorns, fairies, all that kind of thing, and mermaids and things. And kind of now I do pulp space art, robots, and the occasional figurative piece and the occasional maybe mermaid piece. But yeah, I do cross section.
Awesome. And Bob.
Hi, Bob Eggleton. I have been doing this kind of thing since as long as I can remember. I was 4 years old, really, when I started drawing a lot. And I sort of took that into the 1970s and, watching monster movies, science fiction, Star Trek, 2001: A Space Odyssey. That was a big game changer for me. Mm-hmm. I sort of like the whole connection that it's just fantastical aspects of it, whether it's literary, whether it's comics, whether it's media. Mm-hmm. It's all sort of part of one kind of thing, one mindset, I think. And anyway, I always used to draw a lot of pictures and stuff, and a lot of people gave me a lot of grief, and they said, "Oh, it's never going to go anywhere. You can't go anywhere in art. You can't do anything in art." I'm like, well, I don't agree with you. I said, let me. This is what I can do. This is kind of, and at one point, like I was getting out of high school, this is all I can do, And so, through a lot of happenstances and a lot of lucky things, the parents, they supported me a lot on this endeavor, and I got into doing art. And then in 1983, it will be 39 years this May that I will be consider myself a professional. I was actually making a living from art. Wow. And so I went to a lot of comic and science fiction conventions in the late 70s, the early 80s, a lot of the Boston ones and BosCon and the WorldCon they had there and all that. And it really, seeing all this artwork by other great artists really inspired me to get into doing my own and taking my own stuff to another good direction. And that was, how it kind of started. And I was at Royal Island College for a little while, and I found it to be kind of stifling. Well, wasn't bad, but it was just like where they just decided that, well, you can't, you have to think in this kind of this post-Vietnam, post-Watergate kind of thinking at the time, and everything was this like conceptual work, they called it. So like guys that you admired, like Frank Frazetta, even Norman Rockwell, people like that really told stories of their artwork. Comic book artists, especially Jack Kirby. Oh God, Jack Kirby was big. It was all these. We were all wanted to draw like Jack Kirby with the square fingers, And the thing is that they also said to me, they said, no, they said that's just so, that's not avant-garde enough, and you need to think about how to make a pile of dirt look like a statement in the middle of a room and get a grant to do it. And I just that was not that. It was maybe the time and things. And I don't discourage art school now because it's different, but then it was of the time, and it's very much of the time. So I went on, and I just decided, I had one influential teacher in Royal College who basically said, "Hey, kid, you're ready, do it." And so I did, and sort of that's how I've been doing it ever since. And I had a lot of things I kind of fell into, you know, book covers and stuff like that. I was there when somebody else couldn't do something, so they gave it to me. And then I got into working on movies later in the 90s, mid 90s. I got into working on movies, including, aspects of Star Trek, the movie Sphere. And then Jimmy Neutron, and let's see, The Ant Bully, and the short film The Idol, and some other things that I've done that are just kind of, their involvement with them, and it was just kind of fun to do. And so, and with all luck, I may be headed back into doing more movie work. We'll see. But in the meantime, I've done comics, I've written comics, I've illustrated comic books. And I've done covers to them, and covers to book covers, and so on and so forth. And so it's all sort of been one long progression.
That's a lot of work, though. I mean, almost 40 years in the business, it's
at a business that is a 95% failure rate, as they told me starting off.
Yes.
You're
And
still going strong.
And I'm of the 1% of the 5% that even like did what I did, and they told me that I used to go up to visit advertising firms and stuff in Providence. I did a lot of advertising work, which was banal, but it paid, and that's what I did. But I went to visit all these people, and it was just like, they were, I'd work with them and I'd talk with them and stuff. And one guy said to me, he says, he said, man, he said, you have such a high failure rate in this business. He said, you really got to think twice before you go into it. And it's like, and so I just didn't think of any other way to do it. And a lot of good happened. Like, I got a job 40 years ago. I was working in an art supply store in Providence. It doesn't even exist anymore. A very small mom and pop place. You could smell the dust in the place, and you could smell the graphite on the floor. It was this kind of place, and I mean, they had all kinds of problems. It was just one of these places. The guy bought it into it in 1940 something, and this is like in the 80s now, and he got in a grandfather rental agreement of $75 a month for like in perpetuity.
Wow. And
so even in the 1980s, he was in a historic area of Providence, front Main Street, and he was paying $75 a month rent.
That's amazing.
And the people he was renting from, they found a way out of it toward the mid 80s. They found some loophole to get out of it. And but I worked there, and they were great. And they not only took care of all my benefits and all this stuff, but I also was able to work. They give me discounts on my artwork, like major discounts on art supplies, art tools, and stuff. Like they say, oh, we got this new pen. Here, take it home and go try it. Or like, we got this new brush. Take it home, go try it. Tell us what it is. The salesman gave it to us. And I'm amassing this large collection of free stuff. And then the other stuff was like a 40% discount. They would just give me a chunk off of it, and so I didn't have, and then we catered to RISD students, which at the time RISD was $6,000 a year to go to, and they come in and they tell me what they were doing, and then I got friendly with the teachers, and the teacher said, "Why don't you come on over? We're having a critique and of the work, and you can watch what the students do, and you can sit in the back and just watch." So I sort of absorbed an education from RISD for like nothing. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
And
right place, right time.
Right place, right time. It was so much I could sum up it everything in like 4 words of my career. For right place, right time.
It's funny you mentioned the working in an art supply store and getting like the supplies at a discount and free stuff. It just reminded me, I used to work for a place, and I won't mention their name now. It wasn't an art supply store, but they let all the it was a school, like a after school program place. They let all the teachers come in and use the studio space for free, their supplies for free. Oh, wow. So if I wanted to go in and paint or do it, I could even take a canvas from them. Wow. And I was like, this is fantastic. It's the reason I took the gig. was because I'm like, I did more digital stuff at the time, but I was like, they have a computer department. I don't have to, I can just sit and draw on the computer. I can go paint. I got nice colored pencils. It was a fantastic gig.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so you guys just, been doing this for a long time. Can you tell us what was it about like the sci-fi or the fantasy genre that attracted you, that made you say, this is what I want to illustrate or paint or whatever? Because, whether you're doing comics or just, prints or whatever it is, book covers, you're drawing in a genre that you love, but there's so many different things, so many different ways of telling a story. You do a comic, you have the sequential storytelling. You do a book cover, you have to tell in one image a story. So what is it that attracted you to the genre? Who were some of the artists that inspired you that you guys were looking at? And just out of curiosity, which do you prefer? More of like the book cover, one illustration print, or do you prefer doing like sequentials or something? So whoever wants to answer first.
What inspired me is the what if principle.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been, even since I was young, I liked the whole science fiction, what's out there, look at the stars, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, fantasy was sort of an aside that came into it. And, being a girl, you like the idea of unicorns and fancy dress and all that kind of thing. And I wanted to illustrate it. Hell, it was bad. Everybody starts out bad and they have to practice to get good.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time to practice to actually get reasonable. And I joined the Air Force at 17 for 6 years, but I took my painting with me. So I was in my room in the Air Force in Darwin, and I'm busy illustrating fan magazines in black and white. But I don't do that anymore because the painting took over, and I couldn't, because both were intense, the black and white and the colour work. Mm-hmm. I decided I couldn't do both, so I did one or the other, and I chose the painting to keep going with.
Yeah.
And I've done my fair share of the fantasy things, and I've tried various different mediums, like Mike Whalen, another artist we admire, have a long time. I tried his art techniques of acrylics and things like that, and basically painted myself into a corner. There was no room for happy accidents, no room to manipulate the paint for long periods of time, or just smoosh enough around that it actually looked decent, and it dried differently. So although I did a number of paintings in acrylics, I eventually went back to oils because I like painting wet in wet and bringing colours out that way. Mm-hmm. And since 2007, that's exclusively what I use. I draw in graphite or charcoal, and then I'll transfer to a canvas and paint. So, I did some fantasy stuff, but I always end up coming back to the hard SF or pulp science fiction is what I paint now. Yeah. Because it's still a what if in progress. Yeah. In my pulp space ones, my rockets are always in flight. They're always the quintessential pointy rocket ships. It's a case of let's go out there, let's see what's out there, what's over the next horizon, next star, all that kind of thing. Yeah. My robots has its own niche, which started in when we were in 2006, 2007. Bob was complaining that I made our studio smell like a real studio because I painted in oils, and he wanted to go back to oils as well. So I set him up and said, okay, you're going to do a painting a day. You paint so fast, you can turn out something small that belongs in a museum, looks like it belongs in a museum, in about half an hour to an hour. Wow. It takes me 4 hours. He takes it a lot less than that. So he started doing painting a day. I set him up for a blog doing that. That's where our blogs came from. And after a few months, I started doing my own. Yeah. And I'd paint found objects around the house, or I'd go and steal his mammoths or toy dinosaurs or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I painted one of the robots, a little red robot, just as a still life. And of course, I painted my birds. Yeah. I keep thinking, I've got to find a niche. I want to do something interesting that's got some life to it, that I've got lots of story ideas and things like that. And of course, add Miyazaki into the mix, and it's lost technology and nature. It's all just this happy explosion of an idea. Yeah. So, the whole lost technology and nature has fascinated me for most of my life.
That's great. And I will say this about, and I like the term, I forget the exact one, use pulp science fiction. Yeah. Because when I look at your work, and I was looking, especially like the robots, they look like the old toy robots from the 40s and 50s. And like, I mean, you're using them obviously as reference and stuff, but like, it's just like I grew up loving like the old Flash Gordon and like the movie serials and Buck Rogers, all those things.
The Art Deco pulp signs.
Exactly. So like seeing those, it's like a throwback to my childhood. And even though I didn't really have toys like that because I was a child, in the 70s and 80s and stuff, and they didn't really have toys that looked like that. I had Voltron and and that. But you got, the stuff that my father grew up on were those type of things. And I just loved that whole
nostalgia.
Yeah, it just and the retro look. And when I even draw my stuff, I tend to go back and look at those as reference for what I do. But I don't, it's not your level. I mean, think my stuff like Jetsons and then you are that, like that's the difference. But
the whole series is called Birds and Bots.
Birds and Bots, yeah.
The Lost Technology in Nature, the 10 toys at one side of it, then I have real robots and birds as the fine art side of it. So it all works together. But it exploded into a million ideas of how to put robots in nature. And I managed to get one into space.
Yeah.
So,
I got to say, I wish I brought one of your cards with me. That you gave me a card with your blog on it. I got to check. I checked it out the other night, and it's fantastic. But yeah, you guys need to go. I wish I could, because I don't remember how to spell your blog name right now to give it out. But
Dog de jour.
Yeah, I'm not going to know how to spell that. I'm sorry. But like, I really think you guys should be checking out the work. I mean, your stuff is fantastic. I wish I asked you to bring some just to show. It's a fantastic work, and I think everybody should be looking at it. Let's just move on to Bob. So who were like the artists you were looking at? How did you kind of?
Well, everybody in the 70s, every kid growing up who was into art or you wanted to be Frank Frazetta.
Okay.
Well, there's only one Frank Frazetta, so you've got to realize that you need to do your own thing. So what I did was I started going back. I started going to a lot of science fiction conventions, stuff like that, and I saw a lot of great artwork. Michael Whalen, Carl Lundgren, Don Mates, really phenomenal artists. And I was thinking, like, that's what I want to do, And what I ended up doing that was really influential to me is I started going back to the old masters of artwork. I started going back to Turner and Frederick Church and people who painted these landscapes, the Hudson Valley River painters and stuff like that. And some of the artists that were, John Martin is another one. These guys painted the 18th and 19th century, and their work was fantasy artwork in some regards. It just wasn't seen as fantasy art. They call it sublime, or they call it romantic is another term they use for it. They wouldn't say fantasy, but it's all there. I mean, you've got everything there. You've got dragons, you've got, all kinds of creatures and stuff like that. And Gustave Doré is a great artist. He's a big influence on Frazetta. And I'd always want to know who influenced Frazetta. So I went back to look at Doré's work, and I found my own inspiration in that, looking at his work. So that's my advice to a lot of people, is just, if you're going to go look at artwork, don't try to copy peer people now. Go look at what was back in the day.
It's funny you say that, because I do a lot of teaching, and I do a lot of cartoon teaching and stuff, and I talk to people who are, want to get in the business, and they're always like, who do you look at as artists? And I'm talking comics right now, and they're talking they're talking about some artists who are here now, like modern day, or if you want to even go back in the 90s when you had the whole boom of Jim Lee and McFarlane and stuff. And they ask me, who do I look at? And I'm like, Alex Raymond, Hal Foster, Milt Caniff, like all the classic guys that probably, I can't speak for those artists, but could be the artists they were looking at, along with Kirby and Buscema and all that. I tend to go classic and I'm not saying I don't like what the guys did in the 90s or any of that. I'm saying they're not the artists that I tend to look at.
I'm the same way. I mean, I'm a big fan of Kaluta, Herb Trimpe.
Exactly.
The Marvel bullpen, as they used to call them, this sort of thing. And it was kind of like, I always had this fantasy, you go there and there's all these guys drawing or something, and it actually was some of that. And I knew that apparently John Buscema, he physically worked there. He was like in their office, and he not only did comics, he did drawing, stuff like that, but he helped other artists who came in. If somebody's working on something that they'd have an issue, a problem, you know, like that, he would straighten them out on it. He'd say like, "Is what you do," and he'd do one guy I know, he did like 3 lines. It was, and he said that solved everything.
And I gotta say, talking about like the fantasy genre, Buscema was a big influence. His Conan books are some of the most beautifully drawn. You know, like he's always said he preferred things like that over drawing.
Well, my favorite guy is from those times, Mike Plug.
Okay,
I love his stuff. Because he was an interesting story because he did Man Thing, and he's still really active and still quite doing his thing. And he Ghost Rider and all that, and sort of like he kind of left in the late 70s, early 80s, just because back then the story goes he saw the handwriting on the wall about certain things with comics. He just saw things going a certain way, and I want to say this, that this may have been, apparently he kind of walked into an office and he got the Superman storyboarding job like on a whim, like accidental. It was like he walked in to see Ilya Salkind or something, and the guy's like, "Can you go to England? You're hired," like that. And everything in movies started with him from there, which included The Thing, Dark Crystal, all kinds of stuff, because it just one thing led to another, and but that's how things were, I think, in those times. And what's odd is that I was thinking back of this in my own career, and I'm thinking back of how everything. They say, well, doesn't the internet make everything easier? And I was like, in some ways, no. In some ways, yes, but in some ways, no. Because for some reason, I used to hear from everybody on the phone, or I get a real letter, you know, in the mail. And that's how things happen. That's how things happen out of the blue. People would just call me up, or I would call them up, and I would say things like, hey, I'm going to be in New York, or I'm going to be here or there. You know, can I stop in? You got anything going on? You know, like that. And literally, I would make things for myself. I would like literally say, somebody said to me as a whim, he just said, this one packager, he's passed away, but he said outright to me, he had a series of books he was doing. When you package them for another publisher to publish. This is the late 80s. And he said the guy they hired just, he fell on the sword. He just couldn't do it. He really botched it or something like that. So he said, can you do anything like this? If we just hand you a comp and tell you kind of what we want. And of course, I just, I was young enough. Yes. So I literally got these jobs out of that. And, it was just, they were relatively easy to do. Just they were straightforward. It was very simple imagery, but it got a lot. It was like, my first cover for Bantam Books, it ended up being, that's how things just happened. And then when I finished with that, the packager's saying to me, well, we like what you did so much with this. We'll give you this. We're going to give you this project too. I got this series of kids books, and I need a guy with a diving suit and a shark. Yeah, sure, no problem. And I would knock this out. And what I was paid then was a lot less, but it covered a lot of my. It covered my life. It took care of me. It was like, it wasn't, somebody gives you $1,000 check in 1987. It goes a hell of a lot way longer than it would go now. And it's an awful lot of, and even when I first sold my first professional work, which is in the early 80s, late 70s, actually, I did paintings for some people and they bought them. It's like, you're thinking $50, $100. That's a lot of comic books, and you had your priorities, and
now it's Godzilla toys.
Yeah, exactly. That was Godzilla toys, and then it's been a really strange, it was the right place, right time thing, and people didn't have the internet, so they didn't chat like that. They didn't have social media, didn't have any of that stuff. They actually had phones. You could call people. You could actually find out somebody's name in the phone book, like somebody who they work for, and call them up and say, "Hi, I know you're the art director for such and such a company. Would you consider working with me? I really would like to show you my portfolio." Blah blah blah. Oh yeah, sure. Come on in. I'll show you this. And then they look and they'll hem and haw. They'll say, "Oh, that's nice." Then like one guy's looking and he's like looking and looking. And I'm thinking, "No, it's not good." He says, "This piece here." He says, "Can I buy stock rights on that? That's beautiful." He said, "I love this. Can you send me a 4x5 transparency? Not even not even hightail 5. It didn't work like this. 4x5 transparency. Sure, no problem." and it was like, you get a bit of money for it, but it was the door. It was the foot in the door in this particular company, because then, where there was one, there's more. The editors look at it and say, "Hey, that's a really colorful piece, and it did well for us. And could he do more for us?" So that is how things happened. And Mike Kaluta tells these funny stories. Some of the old DC comic artists tell these funny stories about, you just literally go up to DC Comics in the 1970s, and there was like a hangout room.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like Julie Schwartz, who I knew very well at the time.
Okay.
I knew Julie really well in the 80s. What a character. I miss him. What an absolute character. And he was like an old time comic, you know what I mean? Like, but very much like the, old, I don't know, like an old time comic. He'd always have a joke or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. And you're thinking, this is the editor of Superman. This guy knew the guys that created, so, this is like, and he's just a guy. Well, Mike Kaluta was telling these stories about how, like, everybody just go up and hang out and draw pictures up in DC. And then Julie would poke his head out saying, "I need somebody to do a backstory for me, some mystery. It's 3 pages long," like that, and then that's how they, well, no, that's how they got in the door. That's how people got in the door. And it was like, and it isn't that way anymore. It's like people, everything is so, people don't have phone numbers. They don't have addresses. They don't have phone numbers anymore. They're mystery people that have mystery emails, and it's pretty weird.
People don't even have names anymore. They have like online personas, and they use I guess a new handle. I don't know what they call them.
It's like they'll have like, one guy's name is like Ionis 14O, like that, and they go online and they post their artwork on these DeviantArt, things of this nature, and it's not even it's just a number. It's just like a strange strange name they thought up for themselves, and that's how they're selling themselves, and that's how it seems. They have an internet community, and I'm looking through some of it, and I'm thinking, who's this? I never heard of this guy.
Yeah, I know. When I teach, especially on the college level, I tell students, get rid of that. Use your name so people know who you are.
Right.
But anyway, we only have like 15 minutes left on the panel, so I just want to move on to another. Listen, I can hear you guys talk. I think I might have to actually have you on my actual show, so we can talk for hours. But I just really had two or three more things I wanted to talk about. First off, I as an artist myself, and as a lot of my viewers at home who are artists, they love knowing about working methods. How do you guys work? What's your working method? If you'd like to go first.
Draw ideas, or try and draw ideas. With the robots, I tend to take reference photos. Like it said, "Hey, sweetie, me and Rover are heading down to the basement for a photo shoot." Mm-hmm. So that's where I'll be for the next half hour. So I set up a few lights and stuff like that with the different robots, trying to get a certain angle maybe, or a close-up of something specific, and work from there. And I'll work up drawings from there.
Okay, so when you're doing your robots, you don't have like an idea in your head.
Oh, I do.
Oh, you do? No, because I was thinking the way you were describing is like you just kind of shoot different angles. Then it felt like you were thinking the idea based on the photo you saw. But no, you're going in with a specific idea. Okay.
And believe me, it usually involves push pins and invisible fishing line and propping things up and backdrops, little fabric backdrops and things like that.
Oh, cool.
And lighting stages and bounce lighting. And, it's nothing. It's basically thrown together. I have no idea what I'm doing, but if it looks good, it looks good. And it fulfills what the idea I've got in my head. But the thing is with that kind of thing is I'll take maybe 30 shots, even if I'm just looking for one.
Yeah.
Because I might pinch an element from one photo and another one from another photo, and then something else from another photo,
Yeah.
and then I've got to try and draw them all up together for as a whole. And if I get sizes wrong, whatever, I can drop the sketch into Photoshop and then enlarge things, move things around a little bit, just to tweak them a little bit before I print them out to actually draw them down. But yeah, because they're so specific in line work and reflections, all kinds of things. Yeah, I tend to take reference photos, specific ones.
Yeah.
When I was back into figurative work after a 20-year break, because painting animals and robots and space is much easier than painting people. But since we've been going to ILXCon, I ran for 3 years a costume salon for artists at ILXCon, which is a major art convention set in Pennsylvania, and currently in Reading, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
It's from Altoona to Allentown, out in Reading, but it's all artists and collectors. And so for the artists, with a couple of friends, I put together a costume place where we could have people come in, dress them up, take photos. We have the lighting, we have all the props, all the things to play with. And the first session we had, I think, because I was running up and down from my art panel to the salon upstairs, so a friend was actually running it and doing a damn fine job. And I took 350 photos. The following year, I took 1,200.
Wow.
My other friend who was helping out took 3,500.
Wow.
So anything and everything, you're holding 50 or 60 photographs per session per person. And I have enough figurative costume photos to last me for the next 10 years or more.
That's awesome.
And there are specific ones I desperately want to paint. And I have painted a few of them since then. And it's really boosted the portrait work, the figurative work. Like I have a love for John Singer Sargent and the Romantics and all that kind of thing of artists back over 100 years ago. That some things in the 1920s, Deco, whatever, it inspires me for figurative painting. So I'm going back to that. I have a certain idea, but those kinds of photos, just random photos, will inspire something else and help bring another conglomerate together. But either that, and the other too with rockets, I just start doodling. The rocket doodles. The rockets started out as I have leftover paint on my palette. What'll I do? Oh, there's a little canvas. I'll just start making things up as I go along. So I did a Saturn and a little tiny rocket taking off, and it went up from there. I now produce bigger ones and big ones as well. So as well as the little ones, but all kinds of variations of what rockets can I paint now? What space station can I paint now? And that's what it's become.
That's
so
awesome.
Pulp space.
No, that's fantastic. Like I said, I looked at both of your work and I find it fantastic. There was a book I kept looking through. I think it was Bob's book on there was like basically, I don't know, it was about dragons, like painting.
How to draw and paint dragons.
Is that still there?
Yeah.
Okay, that might be one of my purchases. It was just a fantastic.
We got one left.
Oh, well, hopefully it's not gone when I.
It was fun. It was a fun book to do. Although the publisher, we didn't really know at the time. The publisher was kind of on their last legs, essentially, and it became a real issue to try to get it through. But it sold a lot of copies. It sold a bunch of copies, as far as I know. It's a bunch of books. I've done books over time and things like that, and but my methodology is just like I start off with like ideas like sketches like this, thumbnail sketches that'll like this. You can't see this, but it's like a little.
Can I bring it up to the camera?
Sure, yeah.
Is that the one you're?
Yeah.
You've got to remember that Bob is attached to the hip to his sketchbook.
Sketchbook. Hold on. Where is it? There it is. Oh my God! Look at that, you guys. And this is all done in. You had the microns there, right?
It's just microns. Yeah.
Yeah, just microns with a little.
My favorite pens. They're really great.
Little whiteout.
Yeah, a little whiteout. Steve, when I started seeing comic artists using whiteout, I thought it was like I'm going like. When I first started doing ink work, I started like, God, I could use whiteout. And I started seeing these major comic artists all using whiteout. So I said, no, I'm not feeling guilty about that at all. Yeah. But what I do is I'm coming up with some ideas for a book called Hyperborea, which I'm doing the artwork for. And it's very surreal. It's sort of primordial but surreal at the same time. So I'm doing that, and then I'm just seeing how these things look I see how the artwork looks at this level as kind of a thumbnail, and then I blow it up large in a photocopy. So I see what it looks like large, so that says I want to paint it. And then sometimes I just trace off the major lines of where I'm going with it to get the freshness of it, and then just start drawing it all over again, getting the more details right, and stuff like that. And then I start painting.
That's amazing.
I know a lot of guys do these very elaborate drawings, stuff like that, but I kind of like want to get to the
You keep it
painting.
loose for the spontaneity.
Spontaneity.
I think that's, I have my background's in animation, so I'm used to like gestures,
Tight.
like speed. No, that's for cleanup. But when
Okay.
I'm trying to capture the motion. It's the speed. I'm looking
Right.
for just that emotion, that gesture, and I feel those drawings that I do are actually better than when I tighten up my work.
Yeah.
So like I look at and I'm seeing, like I see the, just looking for that moment I did. I saw the the feeling of the gesture, the emotion in there. Like I get the feeling of the image. And when you're explaining how you blow it up and then you just pick a few of the important lines, like that makes
Yeah.
so much sense.
And
to
then
me.
when I finish the artwork,
Mhm.
surprises happen, which I didn't
Yeah.
count on. So it might even be better.
Yeah.
It's really interesting how I come up with artwork like that. I don't do these. A lot of guys, God bless them, but they do these elaborate drawings, and then they trace it off line by line by line by line.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It becomes paint by numbers, and then something gets lost. For me, something gets lost in it, and then all of a sudden I feel like I've spent too long on something, because if I spend too long on something, I start seeing everything wrong.
That's when I take it away from
Yeah,
it.
exactly. It's just like, or I think like, I got to move on. I can't keep futzing with it. I can't futz with it. And lately, I've done a few paintings where I futzed with it, and I
Did you
usually
change that painting again?
I'm usually not like that. I got out of that for a very long period of time, but then I kind of jump back.
But you're painting in oil, so you have the ability to change stuff.
Well,
Absolutely, yeah.
His dries very quickly. He uses a walnut oil. I'm a traditionalist. I use linseed
I
oil.
was going to ask if you guys use anything to kind of
I
speed up the
use
drying
walnut
process.
oil. Walnut oil is not. I wouldn't eat it, but apparently it's non-toxic.
Yeah.
And they said that, and I took it up for another artist. He said it really makes things dry really quickly. Walnut oil does.
Interesting.
And so
My linseed oil has a dryer in it.
So I know. I mean, I've never really painted in oils. I've done it. I'm not a big fan of it, but it's also part of it's because of the drying process.
Yeah.
But I've never heard of walnut oil. And one of the things for me as an illustrator and doing cartoony work, it's the speed.
Right.
And I feel that's when I get my most, my best work, when I'm working fast.
Right.
And I capture. So having something like, I didn't even know about walnut oil until you just mentioned it to me in that. So if I was able to maybe experiment with something like that, I might like, because I have less time to work with it. I might actually enjoy oil painting instead of waiting, months, years.
Back in the 80s, the early 90s, I was using something called citrus turpentine.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was actually sleeping in the same place I was painting when I was in the Air Force. So, and of course, I used to get migraines. So, and I don't even use turpentine anymore, not for decades.
Yeah.
But back then, I needed a little bit for either thinning out or cleaning. And citrus turpentine, I don't think you can get it anymore.
Yeah.
But
That's interesting.
yeah, but I'm a traditionalist. It's drying linseed oil and regular oil paints with linseed oil in it.
Okay.
There's one new one's out now with a safflower oil or a safflower blend, and I don't like them very much. Like there's a friend who actually was an instructor at RISD, used to do plein air paintings outside. He took his safflower oil based paints outside to paint, and in the heat they slid off the canvas. So I'm going, I ain't going anywhere near that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't follow oil paint, so I didn't know that was.
Yeah.
Basics, just basics.
Yeah. No. That's,
Yeah. But I also write too. I've written essays for a book on the art of Frank Kelly Freas, who's a classic illustrator. He worked for 4 years for Mad Magazine,
really,
and he popularized Alfred E. Newman. But he also was a Hugo Award-winning science fiction artist too. Yeah. And so I learned more about him writing about him, and taught his widow is a very dear friend of mine. And so we talk about things with Kelly, and I've written what was important about his work and how, and it's going to be a gorgeous book. There's 2-volume book. It's gonna be expensive as hell, but it's a gorgeous book. And yeah, so yeah, there you go.
That's
Kelly
awesome.
was also had a very huge longevity in the field. He went from painting nose cones of planes during the war up through Alfred E. Newman, the Mad magazine.
Yeah,
stuff,
he was still
and
painting in the
science
1990s,
fiction
and then he
covers.
died in 2005,
Yeah.
but he was still painting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And he used to do his own fine artwork. But,
Yeah. You guys, I don't think we even scratched the surface on what I could talk to you guys about.
Okay.
But unfortunately, the panel ends in a moment.
That's
Okay.
I want to thank you guys.
Sure.
Is there anything you want to say before we end and wrap up?
Sure. I'm on Instagram if you want to follow me.
Yeah,
That's
I already
the most
do.
popular
We're both
thing.
on Facebook.
You're both on Facebook.
Yes.
I got to look for you guys because, like I said, I tried to find you guys. I didn't know where you guys were. So I'm going to be following you guys and watching you. And I will reach out at some point to have you on my show so we can
Cool.
talk
Excellent.
for a lot longer.
Okay.
Don't worry, it'll be fun. My shows are always fun, at least for me. So, so let me just do my closing here, guys. So everyone at home, thank you guys for tuning in. I have one more panel for today. I'll be talking with Tim Clark and Joe Souza about the art of the bizarre, and they have some really cool stuff. So if you're coming down to the show, which is the last day of, you got to check them out. I will see you guys later.